Hey team, welcome back to another great episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader Podcast. This is your host, Mark Jewell, and today I am joined by the new CEO at AgPlus up there in Southwest Minnesota, Mr. Josh Hilbrands. Josh, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate the opportunity.
Good to see your face. We've had a long time connection with a couple of different companies that you've been with over the years, and so it's fun to see your career advance, your leadership grow, and now get to take the role of the chief guy up there at AgPlus. So congrats, and we're excited to see where it takes you. What does it mean for you, Josh, to be intentional?
Yeah, for me, I think back to past roles I had in my career and managing people and how that all ties into intentional. And I think it's consistency. For me, it's accountability. And I think a big part of it is just internal follow through, right? Knowing and managing business and people to make sure that when we talk about intentions and execution, I think I tie that all together as one.
Yeah, beautiful, man. Straightforward, to the point. I like it. Makes sense. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about AgPlus. What's evolving for you?
Yeah, you bet. So I was born and raised, grew up in central Minnesota area. Been in agriculture my whole life. Grew up on the farm. Spent time in multiple different business entities with my parents and family owning multiple different businesses. So customer service was always a big thing for me. Growing up around different customer service businesses. So eventually, going through school, got into a co-op system. And right then and there, I fell in love with the combination of the growers, the people, the science behind it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it was the path of what I knew I wanted to do right away for the rest of my life. So I've been in the co-op system for 22 years. And so various roles from sweeping warehouses to accounting to sales to location managers, really getting a taste for and understanding each individual's roles and jobs and what that entailed of, I think has really helped me get to the level where I'm at today. But also, some people development things, management development things, Thrive being a big portion of my career development, at Wheat Growers at the time, many years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
And so I think going through those transitions and some of those education pieces really helped me mold who I am today. And at AgPlus today, 7 weeks in today, obviously in my new role,
Yeah.
but AgPlus, great company, very, very in tune with community involvement, multiple categories of business that we deal with from 5, 6 C stores. We got mechanic shops.
Wow.
We're in the agronomy business. We got an HVAC business in Marshall here. So our hands are in a lot of different things, and it's really unique for me to learn and understand different parts of business that we necessarily that I haven't been used to or accustomed to in different roles, but
Sure.
um, servicing 6 or 7 local communities, and then outside of that, a much bigger rural footprint. So
Right.
yeah, it's been a big blessing and educational piece for me to learn. And there's nothing more that gets me fired up in the day than to learn new businesses, meet new people, and then just watch the folks flourish and succeed in their roles.
Good stuff, man. Unfair question, just to add on to
Yeah.
that. So, 7 weeks under the hood. What's been the biggest challenge in taking on the role, going from VP of agronomy? So you've been on the executive team. You watched Matt over at New Vision kind of take that role. You've been around the system for a while. But what's been the biggest challenge in taking that on? That's my first part. There's a second part coming.
Yeah. So for me, I think a little bit is the newness of the position and what that entails versus being on the leadership team, right? So now the dynamics have changed, obviously, from
Mm-hmm.
maybe being the shot caller, so to speak. But in a sense, Matt did a fantastic job giving me a lot of insight, a lot of leadership abilities and capabilities and decision making from either a team aspect or a leadership aspect in general to step into this role. So I think for me, it's learning curves and things like insurance, right? Those were some things that maybe necessarily as a leadership person, you didn't get into the weeds in, so to speak. But banking is another big thing. It's an understanding of financials and how to manage your business, but now it's above and beyond, right? And so,
Right.
what are those learning curves and levels of depth that we need to know or get involved in the banking side for this business? So there's a combination of a few things there that I would say are hurdles, more learning curves, more so than
Hmm.
anything, but just newness of different aspects of the business that I had different glimpses of, but maybe not the in-depth, oversight to where we are today.
Sure thing. Yeah. Well, with every role, every new level, there's new skill sets and things like that that have to be certainly obtained. And as I mean, even as we grow our business, there are new things like, hey, to get to be a $1 million or $2 million service based business in our arena, that was kind of like that was a big step, right? But to go to 3 to 5, that's a whole like we've had to grow. And we get to grow in processes and systems and in financials and all things in between. So we certainly understand that. So, what has been one of the biggest surprises, or maybe think not negative surprises, but like I just delighted by this part of the role, stepping into that CEO space.
Yeah, for me, it's probably a broader spectrum of people, and I talk a little bit about the quality of people, the turnover. For us at Egg Plus, we're at 2% turnover for the year. That's pretty unheard of our industry today, or at least
Right.
it has been the last year, right? So those are really pleasant surprises to me. The longevity of the folks, the tenure we have here has been very, very surprising. Those weren't the things that I got into the weeds about during interview process when I sat down for this job, right? I kind of understood and realized that no matter what that looked like, it was something that can be looked at, changed, fixed, altered, however you want to position it. But for me, it's the people portion. And really, that's the difference between us and the next agronomy building, the next C-store. We all do the same things necessarily, but it's the people in the building and how they manage their customer service and efficiencies and all those things that come with it. And it's been very, very positive. Very, very intuitive for people wanting to see change. I
Mhm.
think those are all very, really um, things that are positive from my perspective that you don't always get and see sometimes in some places that don't want change or longevity has been there, so they dig their heels in at times. But our people here are looking for a little bit of change, no overhauls, nothing turned the apple cart upside down. But in general, I think that's what anyone really strives for when they see turnovers in these positions and things, that there's
You bet.
hope for something that they wish they would have seen or done differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I happen to know a company out there that likes to help companies like yours with those change processes over
Yeah,
time. So you just,
you
you
bet.
just call when you're ready.
You bet.
So
Yep.
it's I nerd out in those kind of situations. That's why I ask some of these questions. My master's degree is in change management. Effectively, it's in organizational leadership with a focus on change management, and all my thesis was in this arena and how we use technology to aid change, inside change adoption inside of a workplace. And so, it's to me, it's very interesting, and probably to a lot of people, it just seems like something they want to stay away from because change is scary or change is hard, but it's so necessary. And this is why, one of the reasons, at least, why the role of CEO in an organization like yours is so important, really in every organization. But I mean, you have to. It all effectively at the end of the day kind of falls on the shoulders of the chief.
Yeah,
you know
absolutely.
and somebody gets to be responsible and accountable for that. And 36 months from now, we'll look back and it will be evident, like, hey, how intentional were we in curating the right kind of change, the level that we wanted, the core, incorporating the core values of our business and getting this place to look how we want it to look for the next 10 years, 20 years, whatever down the road, right? So there's no better time than the beginning.
Yeah, fresh
So
starts are always a nice time.
absolutely, absolutely. You're talking about, I mean, an incredibly low percentage.
Yeah.
of of turnover, which is one of our questions. So a lot of people seem to struggle with that retention. Are you finding anything specific that was done different at AgPlus? Or this do we have are we heavy in a more mature generation, shall we say, that just maybe hasn't doesn't tend to have the level of turnover, so that may be coming with retirement over time? What are you finding has been working at AgPlus before you got there?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of multiple things. I think the demographics, the age group, play a big part of that, right?
Yep.
I will say we're starting to turn a little bit, to the younger generation as far as some of the retirements coming. Hasn't been hot and heavy, but it's certainly getting up to that level where there's a higher percentage of the mature age group that we're working with. I think culture obviously plays a huge role, right? People and leave people. And so I think in general, our culture of our leadership is really strong, from a fact of buy-in, from direction, from whether it's day-to-day business or bigger picture, coming down to the location levels to the workers to have questions and feedback on what are we doing well, what are we not doing well, what do we need to stop doing. There's a lot of inclusion in those things today from the ground level up that I've always felt that was my strong suit at times, was to make sure that when we're doing a self assessment, so to speak, that it's really drawn in all the way to the ground level for your conversation about change management, right?
Mhm.
It's a lot harder to fight those things or disagree with when they're part of the solution and part of the things that need to happen, and setting the table for that. And so I think it's culture. I think it's demographics. We have a huge and great benefit package. In my opinion, it's one of the strongest I've been around from a retirement benefit package, right? There's fewer and fewer co-ops and businesses today with pension plans that are out there. And so when you're talking about retirement, pension, 401k, all those things, it's the upper echelon from what I've seen and been around in my
Okay.
past career. So I think it's accumulation of multiple things.
Yeah. Beautiful. So it sounds almost like we've kind of built a moat around this place, and right. I mean, you've got the castle walls, and then you got the moat, and you just keep
Yep,
adding, to kind of give people reasons to want to stick around.
absolutely. Yep.
Beautiful. I like it. I like it. Let's talk about that culture. This is you're at an interesting point. Being at the beginning, you have the opportunity to infuse a bit of new culture into the place. So I'm interested in what's important to Josh in
Yep.
terms of like, hey, here's what I'd like to see, but then also what are those parts you want to preserve?
Yeah. So the preserve part I'll start with is the intention of bringing in our folks to help make those decisions, whether it's budgeting, buy-in from different decision making, no matter what the level is. But to start there, I think they've done a very good job of that. I want to continue to build off of that. Whether it's quarterly manager meetings, or we're going to location visits and having one-on-ones with the people at the locations, myself to leadership team on a regular basis. I think that communication is a must for us to hear and know, what our people want, what do they see, for things that we can't be a part of or always there out there day to day.
Yep.
And I think that's huge. Some of the things I'd like to see change or work towards, I guess, to me, a little bit of accountability. I don't think that we have any serious accountability issues, but for me, going from good to great means to check the boxes, right, on are we conducting business the same way throughout our company to be consistent? Is it the right decisions we're making? Is it not? What are expense management, or are we all on the same page? Because it can be hard when you have that many different business units.
Yeah.
We don't need to be so much the same everywhere, but is there consistency in decision making, into follow through with different policies, procedures, and things like that? And so
Sure.
for me, that's probably the thing that stood out the most. And quite frankly, some of our employees at the ground level were, when I went around and had conversations, mentioned is accountability was something that could have been improved upon, right? So when your
Mhm.
people start asking for it, that tells you it's probably a little bit more bigger deal than what you anticipated, because typically it's the opposite, you know?
Right. Right. Yeah.
So
We want more autonomy. Leave me alone. Just let
yeah,
me do my
yeah.
job. Right.
Absolutely. And really it can take one or two mid-level management or upper management folks for that perception. In reality is perception, right? But for that perception to change drastically across all divisions, all different parts of the
Yep.
business. So
Yep. Well, usually what I find in most organizations that we work with, when there's a call for accountability from within the team itself, there's usually some friction hiding in there somewhere, right? There's
yep,
friction because people didn't do what they said they were going to do, or they didn't follow through to some level, like you said, and and then that causes issues, causes friction, and we don't, we're frankly, most of us are just ill-equipped on how to solve those problems one to one in the trenches, and we look to our leadership to help us create
yep,
some sort of some way, right, to get the sandpaper out and remove some of that friction so we can operate smoother together.
absolutely. Yep.
So
And that's my goal, to try to work more closely together as one unit. Love to take division names off and do all those things and call us AgPlus, no matter what business or unit you're in or what that looks
yep.
like, and work more unified and cross helping within divisions and all those things. And I think that's something that was done okay, or started down the process of doing fairly well this last year before I got here. But we are, and I didn't bring this up, but we are virtually a company that's 5 years old. So I mean, it was three individual co-ops that merged together 5 years ago to make one. So
Right.
there is that little bit of I call it a merger hangover, right? It's identity crisis almost. You're trying to figure
Mhm.
out who you are and what you want to be when you get older. And so for me, it's fine tuning that and still bringing in some of those other things like accountability, or, the friction pieces. We competed against each other for 30, 40, 50 years in some cases. And so it's, now you're having people work alongside each other that competed against each other. And so it
Right.
brings a whole nother matrix to the game. So
Yeah.
I think it's a great challenge. I think at the end of the day, everyone wants unity, everyone wants success ultimately, and it's making sure that we're focusing on the right things to move forward and not concentrate on too many, I call it too much white noise, right? How much time are we spending focusing on the things that are taking away from us moving in the right direction?
Yep. Yep. No, it's super interesting. You'll find this interesting based on your what you just said there. So we're rebranding, as you know, as we speak, to the Momentum Company away from Thrive Today, and we went through a whole big process with a company out of Nashville called Brand Builders Group, and they work with companies like ours, influencers, kind of do speakers, trainers, etc. That's kind of their forte, right? Is working with people that are in the type of business that we're in. So we've worked with them on individual brands for both my wife and I. We've now worked with them on transitioning from the Momentum, or excuse me, from Thrive Today to the Momentum Company, and and when we really distill down the essence of what we do as a company. This is going to sound like a pitch, but it's not. It's just so relatable to what you just said. So take
Mhm.
it for what it's worth.
Absolutely.
But when we start looking at, okay, um, why why do we have that division inside of a workplace, right? Like what's bringing that up? So you talk about putting three different cultures together. There's a lot of companies, describes a lot of co-ops in America today,
Mhm.
right? So why do we have this? That's why I wanted to bring this up and share this with a national audience. Okay, the reason that we have division inside the group is, quite frankly, it's due to the friction. It's these little human ideas that, well, this isn't how we used to do it, or now that we're part of this other entity, or this part of this bigger company, we don't get to do it our way. And there's all these little resentments that stack up because I don't feel seen, I don't feel heard. It feels like I'm the one that has to change everything because maybe we were the smaller entity in the deal, right? Or we kept the name from this one, but we kept the headquarters from this one. We do all these things to try to please people. and, and what happens over time is like these resentments start to stack. And if you've listened to my show at all, you guys, what you hear me say is that all the times in life that I've become the most resentful is because of the times in life I've been the least intentional,
Mhm.
right? All the times in life I've become the most resentful is because of the times in life I've been the least intentional. That's why the show is called the Intentional Agribusiness Leader Podcast, because I want to see more leaders operating outside of the resentment category and more in the momentum category, which comes through being an intentional leader. And so when we went through this branding process, what we found is division is the problem, the cause is friction. The solution is unity.
Mm.
Right? It's unification. And so everything, when you look at our list of service offerings, everything that we do is designed to drive unity inside of the companies that we work with, whether it's getting one or two people to work together better, removing friction from the sales process, right? Or getting executive teams to lead with more intention. Like everything is based on exactly that, because what you're describing right there is exactly what we see. I mean, you could almost print it. You could almost print the set of problems across every organization we walk into.
Absolutely. And I've seen so many times in different places where the focus and the energy has been so much towards the friction and the unity is not there. And at the
Yep.
end of the day, you can follow it back to the success or failure, either the customer service or the finances, both, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I think
Mhm.
it's pretty cut and clear. And I think people are intentionally, um, I wouldn't say afraid, but reluctant to have some difficult conversations, right? It's a human
Yep.
nature. And so really it's about placing facts out there. For me, it's here's where we're at, here's what it is, here's our options, here's what we can do. Appreciate the feedback, looking for direction as well. Obviously I have to make that call as a CEO, but at the end of the day, we're going to call a spade and we have to make that decision and move forward. And we need to do that as a group. And if, we can't, then we have to have a discussion on why or what that looks like. Right.
Hmm.
And,
Yep.
not everyone's going to roll the boat in the same direction all the time. And that's okay.
Yep.
I think we have to understand why, and then we need to talk through that and get
Yep.
them, rowing in the right direction.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And frankly, I mean, it's okay that some people don't want to be on the boat when we choose a direction. Like, we're okay
Yep.
with that too. I
Yep.
mean, to an extent, like we're not trying to alienate anybody or anything like that. But from a leadership perspective, we do our best to analyze the situation, be situationally aware of what's going on, and then make the best call on what we think how we move this directionally, how we move this forward. And
Absolutely.
we're living this out in real time. Now we're recording this about a month ahead of the election in 2024. This will probably come out late 24, early 2025, but so we'll have known the outcome by then. But we right now are able to really, I mean, you can see here's two very different ideologies about how to move the country forward. I don't believe anybody intentionally wants to move it backwards. They just have a different idea how to move it forward. And some of us will agree with one side, and others of us will not agree. Now, it's different about living in a country. It's much harder to leave. You can't.
Yeah.
You can leave a company. You can't. It's very, very hard to leave your country. Uh, but we get to live with that, and we don't have to love it, right? We get to live with that, but we don't have to necessarily love the approach, that the leaders are taking. But we get to, man, then when all the dust settles, like, we go back to work, we pull our boots up, right? We pick up our tools and we go do our best.
Yeah. And I think as long as us as leaders are humble enough to admit and put out there, we're going to make mistakes, right? There's going to be
Yeah.
decisions that I make every day that, aren't going to be perfect and they're not going to be correct sometimes, just like anyone else. We're human. But if we band together and understand that, and realize that, the faster we can move on in order to correct the situation or the decision, the better we'll all be. And at the end of the day, as long as we take that same direction and that intent, I think, to be intentional, that's what it means, right? It's to be able to execute on those things regardless of what the outcome is.
100%, man. 100%. So with that in mind, we all get to get better at things. What's one of the biggest things that Josh gets to improve on this year?
For me, it's slowing down, reacting less in this position. I think I got leaders to lead, and I've had that at a lot of levels. It's a little bit different
Yep.
as a CEO, right? And so I think the number one feedback I got from multiple CEOs stepping into this role, I'm very fortunate to have a lot of good folks to talk to and to relay my thought processes and decisions before actually executing or getting feedback on is slow down. Although there's some decisions and things that need to happen, I'm an action orientated guy. it's hard for me to sit on my hands and
Yeah.
let some of those. And it's always been that way, but it's a lot bigger deal in this position to be able to assess situations. There's trends and things that happen that will come and go, and so we can't overreact or react on some things. And quite frankly, I've been one to change probably a lot faster than a lot of others. And
Hmm.
so, that's one thing I think I've consistently tried to tell myself is, all right, just take it with a grain of salt. Let's take a step back, analyze it, and then put on a date and a calendar to come back and revisit and try to dump it off the plate for now so that there's no immediate decisions or thought processes behind it as much as I possibly can.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Good stuff, man. I like that. And good on you for having that wise counsel around you of other people in the role. I think a lot of people, it's biblical that we're told to have this, but a lot of us don't do a great job of doing it. And that's having wise counsel, people around us that have been there, been through similar situations, et cetera, et cetera. Super, super important. So that's great. Uh, what's been one of those, big challenges that you've had to overcome in the course of your career that you would say maybe has prepared you for this role?
I think, the big one for me that stands out was the merger that I went through when I was at Wheat Growers, and then we merged into Agtegra, right? And so I was a regional manager at that time, overseeing 18 locations, had, $400 million worth of business just for that region, and bringing in two different cultures and navigating the decisions and making the decisions on, okay, if we have two locations from rival co-ops coming together, who's going to manage that in that town, right? And so I
Yeah.
had 3 or 4 locations that were overlapping that I had to make that decision on who's the new manager when there was already two there, and going through the people process. And so for me, getting acclimated and going through that whole merger and transaction really helped me understand multiple different things, whether it's the people side of the business and how they react to change,
Yeah.
how to sit down and go through those executions of those business units. I think it was a multitude of different things throughout that process that really helped me prepare and get ready for something to this nature where, yes, we've gone through a merger here 5 years ago. Now, how do you get acclimated? And there were some things I learned a lot that, at the time really didn't hit me until later. It was the branding, to your point. We made sure that every sign off every shed was taken off from the legacy company, right? The longer and the
Yeah.
more I see that at others, they leave, and legacy is important. It means a lot to a lot of
Yeah.
people, especially the customer. And I think that's great. I also know that we can't forget about who we were and how we got here. But in the same token, if we're not looking forward, and the old adage of your windshield being bigger than your rearview mirror for a reason is if we're concentrated on the legacy too much, we've forgotten about the future and what we need to focus on and do. And
Yep.
so I think those things were that thing specifically on the merger to come together as Actegra was one that
You bet.
definitely was tried and true.
Yeah. Well, I'll, if it's okay, I'll share the same advice I share with a lot of executives that we work with, because we certainly see the downstream unintentional effects. Let's just
Mhm.
say of not squaring some of that stuff away, like removing signage, and that's a physical characteristic, right? I mean,
Mhm.
there are still those beliefs and preferences and things that exist below the surface, right? But Josh, it's actually biblical. And this is interesting to think about. But when I first really, like, I grew up going to church and like listening to whatever the priest would say or whatever was shared at
Mhm.
Bible study. But when I finally sat down and read the Bible cover to cover, like myself, and did the study, what I found in uh, in the first 5 books. First of all, the first 5 books of the Bible are a great change management strategy if you really read them, because you're taking these families and forming them into a people, and they're going through these really challenging processes. But when the chosen people get to go cross the Jordan, they get the instruction before they cross the Jordan to go into what becomes Israel, uh, to effectively eradicate all the old cultures, right? And they do it sort of, but they didn't finish the job. And so, and I'm not here to cast stones on this because I've had plenty of change opportunities in my life where I didn't finish the job. But what happens is they didn't. And so for the next several thousand years, right, they're still fighting those old cultures, right?
100%.
To the point where it fractured even their own culture within. So it's an interesting piece. So it's very age old. And so we know this from historical references that when we merge these cultures together and we try to make them into one, if we don't get rid of the old stuff, and it's not that the old stuff was bad or wrong, it's just that it's a new season now. It's a
Yep.
new time in life and the page has turned. It's a new chapter. And so we might as well write that new chapter, right? You get to have a new book that's, under this leader with this brand and we're moving forward and that's it.
Yeah,
So,
and that's and I think that's so it speaks volumes to back to the accountability piece, right? If you're not accountable through that change management and you allow some of the old adages and processes and whatever that may be to continue to float through and say, well, we'll fix it later, or it's just once, or that's the thing that always comes back to me is you're now training or allowing some of those things to continue to happen and you'll never move forward, or it'll be really hard. The
right.
longer you wait, the longer you change. It's that much more time, energy, and effort to get everyone in the right spot. So yeah.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. We live through this at home because we have a blended family. And we've got kids right now from 8 up to 23 years old live from two different countries very different backgrounds, and the one thing that has kept my wife and I together, and it's honestly a full transparency, we've been easily probably the most challenging part is raising kids together as a split family, because you have, well, we've always gone to dad for this thing. And so I just keep going to dad for that thing. Right. Or we always have gone to mom for this thing. And then that can cause conflict because then one person becomes more important, right? Or has more authority than the other one. And so, not to get too much into family politics and family philosophy, but what has been the saving grace for us is us being unified and coming back to, like, this is the center ground. This is what we're creating. That's that, and that's all. So even if we screw up against that standard, we come back to that, and our conversation is like calling each other to that raised standard of the family that we're creating now, not the families of the past, not what happened in the past, no, what we're building. And man, it's the same stuff. It's the
Yeah.
same stuff that we end up coaching people about on on coaching calls when we get into working through change management issues at a company.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's huge, and I think it speaks volumes to like leadership conversations, right? And I try to keep the KISS method as often
yep,
as possible, because I think your point on the family side of things, if we know we have 2 to 3 major initiatives to accomplish our goal for the year, and we come back to those same exact initiatives and we have a plan put in place. And if someone's straying off, we can come back as a group and say, if we're all aligned and we all support those initiatives and we're aligned,
yep.
it's pretty hard to argue or disagree, right? And it's like, yep, we all agreed this is what the plan was. So you come back to it and continue to execute.
Stick to the plan, keep our standards and stewardship in line. Good stuff, man. All right, I know we're running a little bit long on time here, Josh. What book or resource would you recommend for those people listening in today?
Oh boy, I got a whole plethora of them here sitting behind my desk. For me, in a couple of new when I started new positions, Trust Edge was really good for me.
Okay.
New groups, new people, and I think talking through when a person leaves and a new person comes, it changes the culture, right? And it changes direction, and just to make sure everyone's trusting decisions, trusting each other. I think that resource myself, I've reverted back to that. I don't know, probably a half a dozen times in the last 10, 12 years, even just to make sure I'm thinking through things properly, right? Putting things back into perspective, realizing that some of those things are getting back to fundamentals.
Good. Good stuff, man. Well, it's been a really good conversation with you today. I appreciate you coming on the show. Is there anything that you'd share with our listeners before we pop off here today?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking me to come on, Mark, and the things that Thrive has done for me, and I know that's changing over the new branding. But the things
Yeah.
that Thrive has really helped me and my teams with is, working through some of the things that we talked about today and aligning and getting direction and putting things into perspective, but also utilizing it outside of your work. I think is one thing that, sometimes us professionals get too caught up in, especially in roles like mine, where we're so focused on what we do day to day at work that a lot of these things do pertain to our outside life. And I think taking that has really helped me outside of work as well. So I
Love
appreciate
it.
that.
It's good to hear, man. Good to hear. Appreciate you saying something about it. But hey, thanks for being on the show. We appreciate you.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Mark.
There you go, man. Pretty.
Awesome.
I think we're stopping. Hold on. It's still stopping.